always loved reading, and especially in elementary school, I read lots of books, especially Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, and I think that shaped my life as a kid. And watching my little sister grow up and watching her transition between before she enjoyed reading books and after she enjoyed reading books was really interesting for me, because her personality changed and blossomed in a huge way. And so I was wondering how books could affect me as a person, but also how different books can affect every person, because every person is different, and how it can affect the brain, and how that can help with child development and teaching children to grow up with a broader mindset and perspective. So I was looking into how reading affects the brain, and reading affects the brain through the actual basic action of reading, as well as the responses in the brain to what the words you have read are, and the overall understanding of what you have read and how that affects your understanding in your brain. The reading process starts with letter recognition through the part of your brain called I don't have the mouse, okay, the letterbox. There we go. Okay, the letterbox is located right here in your brain, and it's actually quite a curious part of your brain, because it's located in the same position of your brain no matter what language you learn to speak. This is curious because we aren't inherently born to read, so we have to learn it and put a place in our brain of how to read. And so it's curious that it's in the same place no matter what language, because depending on your language, it should be different. It's not different because before humans were able to read, it was actually used for contour recognition. Contour recognition is the recognition and memory of shapes and outlines. It can also help with facial recognition. We have changed the use of the letterbox from contour recognition to letter recognition. Letter recognition is different from contour recognition because it has a specific orientation to the shapes we are recognizing. So that's a letter A, but this one is not recognized as a letter A. This is beneficial to children because some young children get their D's and B's mixed up, and they sometimes write their letters backwards, which this is not dyslexia, it's just that we need to correct the use of orientation in our letterbox from when we are a kid to now we have the orientation of letters corrected in our brain, and that takes time. A little history on the written languages that we have had over the history of humanity. The first written records of languages were clay tokens made by the Sumerians, and they were used to record agriculture and different trades made. The next were hieroglyphs by the Egyptians, which were very hard to remember because of how many symbols. There were almost 900 characters and thousands upon thousands of hieroglyphs. And then came around the alphabetic languages that had around 26 symbols and were a lot less symbols to remember. So that can help in a slightly more efficient reading amount. From the recognition of letters in our brain recognizes entire words. Through the recognition of entire words, we have activation in several places in our brain, usually in webs of small synonyms or any memories we have in our brain connected to that word, and it can be different for every person. The more complicated it gets, the more words you have, so you have more activation with the more words you are reading and full understandings of the words. This gets really interesting when you get to reading metaphors or sensory details. Our brains have activation in multiple parts of the brain, depending on what you're reading. So if you read a word such as lavender, what do you think of? Flowers. So you think of not only your knowledge or thoughts on lavender, but possibly the smell as well. So you're having activation in sensory detail locations of your brain, as well as your actual knowledge or any memories you have connected to lavender. The same happens when you read hands as dry as leather, with activation on the feeling of dry hands, as well as any memories or thoughts you have connected to that. This is called embodied cognition. Embodied cognition is when the brain becomes active on a sensory detail when you aren't actually sensing that memory at the time. This is an important part of the brain because it helps promote imagination, especially for children. To have a big imagination is helpful because they are more able to create their own ideas and have a more open mind. Another important function of the brain is called theory of mind. Theory of mind is similar to embodied cognition, but instead of sensory details, it focuses on mental states. Mental states are things such as beliefs, desires, the ability to pretend, and learning about others or yourself. Theory of mind is used through thoughtful analysis, which is a deeper level of processing, and it exposes you to a wider range of ideas. Being able to use theory of mind to understand mental beliefs help you better to empathize as well as to understand others and yourself. This leads to perspective taking. Perspective taking is when you look at someone and they have a different belief system than you or understanding, and you are able to look at theirs and be able to determine that it is different than your own, but theirs is also legitimate as well. This is helped with challenging reading because we are introduced to a wider range of perspectives so that we can empathize better and be more socially conscious because we can understand someone's beliefs as well as our own. It lowers dichotomous reasoning, which is looking at the world in binary categories, and it helps encourage dialogue between people with different perspectives so that we can decrease prejudice and stereotyping. Looking at more perspectives can help with identity formation. When you read books with different characters, you are able to see something in characters that you don't see in your daily life, and you can help identify with those characters, and that helps with identity formation as well as spiritual formation. And that helps with self-acceptance. And self-acceptance is really important in children because to accept yourself is to become more confident and be able to look at the world in a better view. Teachers and parents can help child development through challenging reading and exposure to different people if you look at the world in a more accepting way. Now, Honey Freeman, who I interviewed, said that the best way to help with child development is to build a scaffold for them where you have building blocks that help them to reach a higher level of learning and understanding so that they can have a more open mind about the world. But it doesn't have to stop at children. Books can affect not just the future in children, but us too. If we read more books with more diverse perspectives, we can understand our world, our history, and our people better, and make our future a more accepting place. Reading isn't just affecting our brain function and functions in our brain, but reading is affecting our world today. Thank you.